Hello, the topic for today is multiple sclerosis an inherited disease? Is it a genetic disease? I'm going to simplify and discuss the science behind genetics and multiple sclerosis. This is an important topic because if we don't believe that we can recover because we have this inherited disease, it really basically gives us no hope, right? And we really feel that our life is out of control and there's nothing that we can do to recover. So it's very important to look at the science, the basic science, and you can dive deeper after we're done, but you'll see that there's a lot of hope because when you look at the science says that it looks like we can recover. And there are a lot of wellness champions that are recovering from multiple sclerosis, including myself over 30 years ago. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I am the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. And I am a teacher and a health coach. And when you get your health and your life back from a serious disease like multiple sclerosis, for myself, that has just been my passion to help others recover. And so over the years, we've learned a lot. We've served over 1,000 wellness champions in well over 15 countries, and we've learned a lot. And today, this topic, it keeps popping up. People keep asking me, is it possible that it's just a genetic disease and there's nothing that I can do? Or how much do genetics play a part in multiple sclerosis? So again, most people aren't clear on this topic. And if we look at multiple sclerosis, there are two schools of thought. The one school of thought is that multiple sclerosis is possibly a combination of genetic and environmental factors. And then other people like myself, and this is really the current idea of how multiple sclerosis is that multiple sclerosis is an infectious disease. And we're going to compare this to the science of, what there is for science for genetics. So let's talk about multiple sclerosis and what we do know. So what we know is that multiple sclerosis is the most common disabling neurological disease in adults between the age of 20 and 40. It's an inflammatory disease, and if you haven't listened to my other videos, I talk a lot about really helping people to understand what inflammation is. Just really quickly, inflammation is our immune response to some enemy, and the enemy is usually some kind of a pathogen or like a parasite, disease-causing microbe, or the toxins that they produce. So we know it's an inflammatory immune system. Our immune system is fighting something that is well established in science. Just checking to see, yes, awesome, you guys are there. And then also, multiple sclerosis affects women 3 times more often than men. And it was first described, so doctors in 1838 described the symptoms of multiple sclerosis already way back then. And so now, 140 years later, we still don't know what causes multiple sclerosis and there is no cure. So that was a long time ago. In the 1870s, it was actually labeled, multiple sclerosis was labeled as a disease. It was recognized as a disease. So that's 1870s, a long time ago. If we look at observational studies, so these are basically where they look at people that have MS, their family members, they kind of look back on things. They notice that siblings, so brothers and sisters of MS patients, have a higher risk of developing the disease, multiple sclerosis. They've also found that for identical twins, there could be up to a 30% increase in both twins having multiple sclerosis. Spouses and adopted children have a multiple sclerosis risk like the general population. So if you are married to somebody who has MS, your risk for MS is similar to that of the general population, but also if children are adopted into a family. And we're going to talk about how this is a very loaded topic. So the prevalence of multiple sclerosis is higher in certain parts of the world. So like in Canada, MS is really high, especially in the rural, like the farming communities of Canada. It's one of the highest, or maybe the highest in the world. So also Northern European and North American also have higher incidence of MS when compared to Southern European countries. And MS is not as common in certain ethnic groups. So like for Japanese and for African Americans, Chinese, but there again, this could also change if they move to a different environment. But traditionally, African Americans and people from New Zealand, Japanese, etc., they are less likely to have multiple sclerosis. So with these genetic studies, these observational studies, we know that it is speculated that, so these are theories. What I'm going to share with you are theories. Nothing has been proven. All right, so it is speculated, or it's a theory, that genetic influences from inherited genes from families, from family members, I should say, and certain populations and ethnic groups could potentially increase the risk of developing multiple sclerosis. So that is in like what some scientists have felt. And again, this is from observational studies where they are kind of looking at families, and we don't know, like, there haven't been a ton of these studies. It's not like it's been exhaustively studied. And what I would really challenge is that, we'll talk more about it, but correlation does not equal causation. So just because two things are kind of, sometimes they happen at the same time, that doesn't mean that there is a certain cause that causes them to be there at the same time. Like, for example, just that it's only hereditary. For example, like with what a lot of current research, so a large and ever-growing body of research is showing, is that people that have multiple sclerosis have dysbiosis. So they have too many disease-causing microbes or parasites in their body and not enough health-promoting microbes. And we know that a lot of different parasites cause diseases. So parasites do cause disease, all kinds of diseases. And we know that different parasites like to live in different parts of the world, right? There would be different, sometimes they could be similar, like maybe family members, so maybe roundworms, but as far as getting down to species or cousins, there would be different types of parasites that live in different parts of the world. And it makes sense that if, let's say, a family member or maybe other family members that live in a certain area, let's say in Canada, in rural Canada, they might be exposed to similar parasites too. So these are all reasons why, just because something, like where possibly there could be a higher risk of a parent or a sibling, a parent and a child or siblings to have MS from the same family, it could just be that they have similar environments. So they could have similar triggers, and that could be parasites, because all indications, especially when you're able to recover by treating the parasites, is kind of a no-brainer. So it's really important to kind of understand the types of the studies that they're doing to see that these are not like, 100% proven studies. It's like, oh, we're just kind of looking at families and kind of seeing what kind of trends we see. But again, there can be many factors that would cause those trends. And then with respect to gene studies, so this is just out of interest, the first gene that was potentially associated with multiple sclerosis, so they don't know for sure, but it could have potentially been, and we'll talk more about why they think that was back in 1972. So that was when the first potential gene that could possibly increase the risk of multiple sclerosis, it was identified in 1972. And since that time, there have been hundreds of genes that have been identified. But a lot of these genes have to do with immune function. And that gives us another clue. So when we see that certain genes might be upregulated or turned on, and it's like for immune function, then we think, okay, why would our immune function be upregulated if we have multiple sclerosis? So what the standard of care would say is, well, because your immune system has gone haywire, it's attacking your tissue, it's attacking your nerves. But if we use common sense, we say, okay, well, our immune system is there to defend us from infection. And if our certain genes are upregulated, then maybe that has not to do with the risk of MS, but maybe like, could these genes be like more active in other diseases too? Because maybe other diseases are also infectious diseases. And sure enough, they find that in research. So again, they have found, at least 100 different genes that could potentially, if they're activated, be involved in a higher risk of MS. But these genes are often involved in other diseases like diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, intestinal bowel disease. Those of us with MS, we have dysbiosis in our gut tremendously. So it's not specific to MS, but it's more specific to the activation of, or the upregulation of the immune function. And again, that totally makes sense if we're dealing with different types of infections. So scientists often assume that active genes involved with immune function, so let's say our body is, like our immune system is having to work harder, so the genes are producing, it's activating the immune system more in various different ways. So then our standard of care would say, well, that has to do with immune dysfunction, right? And what I would say is, well, possibly, but more likely what would make more sense is, let's see if there could be potential infections that our immune system is fighting more. So the standard of care just writes it off as immune dysfunction, where the current research that a lot of our neurologists are not accessing, they're not up on, really is showing that we have dysbiosis, we have some, and I've shared lots of videos. Make sure to watch some of my videos. I've got a playlist on YouTube. We're putting them up on our website, Live Disease Free. Also, they're on, it's just organized a little bit better in YouTube, but they're also on Facebook. But you'll see that sometimes it's not even like some of these bacteria are really nasty, like Clostridia, but it's the poisons that they produce that cause the inflammation. So it's either the infections and the poisons they produce that causes an upregulation of our immune system, and genes can be more active. And so maybe it's not immune dysfunction. Maybe our immune system is just trying to defend us like it is genetically programmed to do. So MS is not an inherited disease. According to the MS, the National MS Society, right on their website, they say MS is not an inherited disease, meaning that it is not a disease that can be passed down from generation to generation. So that's pretty clear. So I think they kind of get that. But they do believe that certain genes can be more active in people that have MS, but that's true for lots of other diseases also. And that has to do with epigenetics. So the study, like way back years ago, when I did my science degree, I did a year of genetics and I did a year of biochemistry, a lot of memorizing, and physiology and immunology and all of these pre-med courses that really helped me to have a very basic understanding of how the body works. And I still remember to this day, my cell biology teacher, he was very humble and he said, Pam, and he said to the class, I'm teaching you what we know today. But it's very likely that things are going to change and things are going to be updated because our body is so amazingly complex. And we honestly know very little of how it operates and why it operates because it is so intelligently designed. So epigenetics is the study of different factors that influence the turning on and off of genes. And so our mood, the food we eat, the microbes that live inside of us, there are so many factors that influence which genes are activated, turned on, and turned off. And so it's very important to understand that it's not a simple thing to just figure out like, oh my gosh, these genes are more active. Well, they're active in other diseases, and are they active, like which genes are active and why else could they be active? And so it's true, like if we would have infections, then sure, our immune system is going to be more active. Absolutely. Certain genes could be more active. Again, the microbiome inside of us, there are certain genes that, will impact, good and bad microbes will impact how our genes are expressed if they are turned on and off. Genes are like a genetic code, and they usually code for a protein. So it really is involved in a lot of things like epigenetics. And so it's a very complex topic. But the consensus, according to the MS Society, is that MS is not an inherited disease, and it is not passed on from generation to generation. It could be more common in certain families, but I believe, and this is what we have seen, is that if that is the case, they have usually been introduced to some of the same parasites. And it is true that environment plays a really big part in if we come down with MS or not. So this has to do with, like for myself, for example, we had 6 kids in our family. I was the oldest. And I was we were on antibiotics quite often, but I was the only one in the family that was on tetracycline for several months for acne. And I really believe that that was a very big factor that devastated my microbiome so much. And then I was susceptible to whatever parasites were in my environment. So we grew up on a farm, and we had pigs, and we had a horse, and we had bunnies, and we had chickens, and we had turkeys, and we had dogs and cats. I was in the dirt all the time, and I was a horticulturalist in the back in the day. My dad was starting to grow, when I was really young, he was starting to grow perennials. We had a garden. So I was in the dirt, I was with animals, I was exposed, but I lost my natural defense. I lost that ecosystem. And at that point, that is when I really, really started to, have little different health issues, but nothing until I was 28. And that's when I had the optic neuritis. After the birth of my second child, lost all vision in my left eye. It was like I had a black patch for several days. It was a very severe case. But the exciting thing is that I really hope that what I've shared with you is just kind of like, I know it's just a very light covering of the topic, but it helps you to think, maybe multiple sclerosis isn't inherited. Maybe it is not a genetic disease. Maybe there are certain things in my environment that are turning certain genes on and off, and maybe I have some control and power to actually influence which genes are turned on and off. And that is the study of epigenetics, which is exciting. So after 50 years of studying the genetics of multiple sclerosis, is it inherited or not? We still have no solid evidence, and if you find some, send it to me for sure. I would love to review it, but I've looked and I haven't found anything concrete that shows that MS is an inherited disease. There are certain observational, again, they're kind of just looking, it's pretty hard to prove. And then you wonder, so like if all indications is that it is not a genetic disease, it is not inherited, why are we still researching this topic? Or I should say, why are some researchers still researching this topic? If there are thousands and thousands of people suffering so terribly, and it costs so many millions of dollars to research, why would we not be researching in a promising field where we're looking at, we know that we have dysbiosis, we know that our microbes are really out of balance. Why are we not looking at that? And when we are looking at genetics, what is the purpose of looking at that, right? And so is it so that they can try to get some kind of a genetic test so that they can determine our potential risk of MS and then maybe start putting us on the disease-modifying drugs earlier? That would make sense for a company that needs to make profit, for sure. But how is this going to help people that have multiple sclerosis? And that is the big thing. And I am just really hoping that as you join in watching my videos and start learning about all of this, that you really help us spread the word, because I'm just one person. And yes, we have wellness champions that have recovered, but we're just, several hundred, and we're dealing with billions of people on the planet, and we're dealing with and I'm just talking about the MS industry. It is such a lucrative industry, and it is such a probably more than multi-million-dollar industry. But our healthcare system, the way it is multi-billion dollars. And it's really time that we, the people, start to challenge things, right? We really start to challenge. So I hope that, if you want to go deeper into this topic, great, do it. And you'll see that there's very little evidence. Sure, you can have more than one person in a family. It's not common, but you could. But is that because of their environmental factors? Is that because they might have kind of like the same parasites, the same infections? And yes, these infections can affect which genes are turned on and off. But the exciting thing is that when our students are treating the parasites effectively, that their symptoms, their disease process stops, it doesn't get any worse, and they have a lot of recovery, a lot more than they thought possible. So if the genes are turned on and you can't turn them off, we would not see that. We would not see people recovering, and we are seeing people recovering. It has to do more with, if you don't have full recovery, it has to do with, number one, have you treated effectively enough? And number two, the second part is maybe there is some damage to a nerve that cannot be repaired at this time. But as far as the genes, if it's genetic and it's genes that are permanently defective in place, you wouldn't be able to recover from multiple sclerosis. And if that happened from birth, you would have MS from birth also. So MS usually occurs between after the age of 20 years old, very often late 20s. For myself, I was 28. So go ahead and type your questions in the question box. And I'm just going to see if there was anything else that I wanted to share. So let me go to your questions and your comments first. I love your comments. And I did read the comments before the live event, so please make sure you type your comments in before the live event. And I did hear that people were saying that sometimes that they had it in their families, and some people thought it was baloney, that it's not genetic, and that person was on the right track. So hello, Anna. Hi, Raymond. So we've talked before, and you were downgraded to secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, and now you're partially paralyzed, and you can't use your right leg anymore. And it's just like a crutch, but I can't move it at all. Do you have any advice for me? I really appreciate your input. So Raymond, I don't know when we spoke. I have spoken to hundreds and hundreds of people over the years. My heart goes out to you, and I am so incredibly sorry. And I had a conversation with a family member over the weekend who's working in British Columbia, Canada, in health authority, basically organizing doctors and things. And we were talking about the healthcare system, and I said, we really need an integrative healthcare system. And she said, I totally agree. I said, people are suffering so terribly. We cannot afford the system that we have in place. That the MS drugs are over $100,000 a year, a lot of the newer ones, never mind the MRIs and the hospital visits and the expert visits, etc. And people are suffering so terribly. And I know that not everyone's going to implement the things they need to do to turn this around, but a lot of people would, and this has to be part of our healthcare system. We have to give the doctors, the healthcare providers, we're sickness care providers, and we have to have an integrative approach. So Raymond, for you, the only way to see how much improvement you can get with your leg, there's still hope. We have a couple of students that were worst case scenario, hadn't been able to, they were in a wheelchair for at least 5 to 10 years, had MS for over 20 years, hadn't walked for a very long time. And after multiple treatment cycles of treating the parasites, they were starting to walk with crutches. And that's usually what people do because they don't have a lot of leg muscle. So they have to build back their leg muscles. So the exciting thing is, Raymond, that if you take a different path, if you decide, and I just wanted to share too, I was on a call with a beautiful lady who just joined. She is a new wellness champion. She used to be like a professional skater and like racing, and like those people are ripped. Like they're really, really ripped. So people that get MS we're not couch potatoes. We're not people that haven't taken care of ourselves. And how do you go like from being that fit to becoming to the place where you can hardly walk anymore, where you're using a cane? That cannot be just genetics, or it's not just like you were born with a gene that just turned on just randomly, right? And just started to give you MS. So the exciting thing for her is like she has been following the Live Disease-Free diet for, I would say, about a week, maybe a week and a half. She's noticed her balance is getting better already. She's noticed that her balance, but also her spasticity is less. So the cramping in the legs is much less, 20% less, she said. And that's just starting, not even doing it properly. So the first thing, Raymond, is to follow the Live Disease-Free diet. You can find the guidelines on our website. You can find the guidelines on the Live Disease-Free community in Facebook. You can find it all over the place. I've done lots of videos. I have a playlist in YouTube. Start to decrease the carbs. Those parasites love carbohydrates. And if you decrease them, you will start to notice symptom improvement. But if you want to recover, and so this beautiful new wellness champion, she was in tears today because I said, I can't make any promises, but what I have seen from other students, like she can still walk. So I said, if you treat these infections, these parasites really well, there's a very good chance that you could get back to skating again. You could get back to rollerblading again. And she just started to cry because she has tried everything for many years. I think she's had MS for, I think it was at least 18 years, a long time. And she's tried all kinds of integrative, but none of them have ever treated these parasites. And just simply by decreasing the food to them within a week and a half, 2 weeks max, she's already noticing that she's having significant symptom improvements. So let's take the whole genetic inherited topic out of the discussion here. And we know it's a complex discussion. We know that it's very complicated, which genes are turned on and off. Let's just let our body do its job. Let's support our body. Let's really deal with these infections and the toxins they produce, give our body nutrition, give our body sunshine, balance stress, do all the healthy things, but also treat the infections. So Raymond, start with the diet. That's the first place to start. You will notice symptom improvements if you get your carbs low enough. And that is going to get you excited. And then join us, become a wellness champion. You have to treat, and you can look for a practitioner, but it's really hard to find practitioners at this time. We are working with them. We have a practitioner members area. We are really hoping to get this to go mainstream. It will in time, but the people on this video, you don't have time to wait for that. So don't lose hope. I know that your leg is really suffering, but you just never know. You could potentially still get full recovery. I don't know. The body is a miracle. See what it can do, and you might be pleasantly surprised. And Kevin, I thank you so much for your kind words. It is exciting, isn't it? Kevin is another wellness champion, amazing, who is walking again and going without his cane often. It doesn't get old. Like when you go through hell of having a disease like multiple sclerosis, it is the biggest high to recover and to see other people recovering. Awesome. And Mara, yeah, unfortunately, it's not just multiple sclerosis, but it is all kinds of diseases. Like healthcare has become a sickness industry, a multi-trillion-dollar sickness industry. It has to change. It is going to change, but we can take our health back. We don't have to wait until it changes. All right, just looking at your comments. I love all your comments. So Kevin was saying he grew up in Texas, barefoot. Some of these parasites can actually crawl through your skin on your feet too, which is really disgusting. Yep, tetracycline girl here, Margaret. Yeah, that was me too. I have in my book, Become a Wellness Champion, which is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. There's a study in there, and people that have been on a broad spectrum antibiotic like tetracycline, they looked at thousands of people, and they found that I think it was about 70% of them had some kind of chronic disease after being on a broad spectrum antibiotic for a long period of time. So yes, our food has been messed with. Yes, our environment has been messed with. But honestly, the broad spectrum overuse of antibiotics is really the biggest factor that has devastated our healthy microbes that protected us from all of these different parasites. So I think it's Maisie. What is your plan? So the plan is the Live Disease-Free program. And there's two types of people that are watching right now. People that are just like, I've never met you before. I don't know who you are. This sounds kind of interesting, but I need to learn a little bit more about it. Maybe you want to start by following the diet and starting to feel better. You know, watch my videos on YouTube. Come to visit our website. There's actually there's all kinds of things you can do. You can start the diet. You can take a survey to see if you know how out of balance you are, if you're dealing with dysbiosis, parasites. And if you're at that place where you're like, Pam, I've been following you, I've been watching your stuff, and I really believe that I have these parasites, and I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to start treating. I want guidance. I want a proven plan that works. You've listened to the successes of the wellness champions and as Kevin said, the persistent and consistent successes of the wellness champions. This is unlike anything else in the world because it's treating the root cause in the most cost-effective way possible. If there's a more cost-effective way, I will show you. That is our goal, because healthcare, even working integratively, should not have to cost you hundreds of dollars every month for years. It should be basic tests. It should be basic supplements, just like a multivitamin mineral from plants. It should be using the most effective, cost-effective treatments to treat the parasites as quickly as possible. So it does not have to cost $50,000, $100,000 as some people have spent on their health, and they're still sick. And the big thing that I think is for you to learn this skill. Eventually, like if you follow my stuff, you will see how important it is to learn this skill. You will have it forever. You won't need me in the future. You won't be led astray with very well-meaning practitioners that say, you should do this and you should do that and you should buy this supplement and you should do this test, and you'll be, thank you, but no thank you. I'm just going to stick with the basics that I know that I need. It is the way to recover. It is the way to prevent future disease. And it is the way to have the highest quality of life. And it is the way to do this all in the most cost-effective way. And healthcare costs continue to rise, and it really helps us to shelter ourselves from those expenses. And let's see, I love all your comments. Please share your comments. And even more than sharing your comments, I encourage you, I beg you that if you follow my work and if you feel that it's helpful, please share this with other groups. Please help us to get the word out. You know, as far as I know, we are the only group that is helping people to treat the parasites. So not just the fungus, not just the Lyme disease, but also the worms, the protists, all of the different infections, and share the science, share the case studies, help people to see that there is hope for them. That is so incredibly important. What is the histamine connection, and why do our bodies even create histamine? So the immune system is incredibly complex, and we have an innate and we have an adaptive. So the innate is kind of like the first line of defense. So the innate immune system is kind of like they call it the primitive immune system, and then there is the adaptive. So if our body's been introduced to a certain pathogen, a certain parasites, it can remember, it can produce antibodies quicker. So that's the adaptive. So if we go to the innate, so the first line of defense, that is where histamine is really involved a lot. And histamine is just part of the immune response. There is this huge history of histamine, antihistamine with multiple sclerosis. So when I was first diagnosed, there were two doctors in Holland, neurologists, that both had MS, and they were treating MS in their patients, their neurologists. And they used antihistamines to help manage the symptoms. So they would make sure that their patients would avoid certain foods they felt they were sensitive to, and they would give them antihistamines. And so that was the first thing that I learned about. But I'm giving a huge disclaimer here that antihistamines, you have to use them very intelligently with your doctor. Like, don't just go on them thinking that they're going to help you. So when I was in the early stages of MS, I had a lot of insomnia. It was like I was wired, and I took Polaramine. That's what they recommended. And I took that under the guidance of my doctor. It's over the counter, but I still worked with a healthcare professional. And I found that what it did is it just kind of brought me down to, like, I could sleep. And if you can sleep, you can start to heal. So I used it very short time to help me to sleep. And that's what our students will use sometimes short term. Don't rely on it if you're not going to treat the parasites, because if you research antihistamines, it's not a good thing to be on for a long period of time. But short term, there's over the counter, I think it's called Nidal, there's other, and they're just basically, I think the active ingredient is from Benadryl. So just, that can help people sleep. So this is part of the recovery. And what I found really fascinating is that I think around 1950, there was a doctor, I think Jonas, in Tacoma, Washington, and he somehow, through another doctor, found that giving MS patients histamine injections, it helped them tremendously. And so he wrote a book, and I can't remember what the name is, but it's Dr. Jonas, and it has to do with MS and histamine. So I found one. It's out of print. It's been out of print for a long time, and I had to cross the border into the US to pick it up, and I paid $200 for it because I was like, I want to know the truth of what he discovered and what he found. And so what he was doing in Tacoma, Washington, and they actually gave him a part of the hospital, is that people with MS would come in, they would give them histamine injections, and then within a week or two, like, some of them were so terribly disabled, and then they would walk out. Like, they'd come in on a stretcher and they'd walk out, or come in a wheelchair and just walk out. And he became, so of course, word of mouth, right? So the hospital got overflowing with patients. And then there was, I think, a hotel that accepted to take people in because people had to wait, or I don't even know if they were treating in the hotel also. But then they shut him down. And there was also a doctor in Canada that was doing the same thing with histamine injections with people that had asthma and allergies and things like that, and had tremendous, tremendous success with them. So our body, so there's different pathways. I'll try to keep it really simple. So there's a H1 pathway and an H2 pathway. And the H1, I think the H1 is more of the inflammatory pathway. So when our body is fighting infection, I've shared that there's many different ways that these infections, through themselves, but also through the poisons they produce, that can cause dysregulation of the immune system. So it's not our immune system. It's kind of like an unfair fight. So we can be in this chronic inflammatory state. And so there's a lot of histamine produced. And there's discussions about, do we have a lack of histamine or do we have too much histamine? But anyhow, being in this chronic inflammatory state, the H1 pathway is overactive, and the H2 pathway, which is the immune modulatory pathway, is underactive. And so I think when they're giving the injections of the histamine, that's actually overflowing into the H2 pathway and supporting immune modulation. So I'm trying to keep it really, really simple, but it's fascinating. It's another one of those things that could potentially really help multiple sclerosis. So on its own, histamine injections probably isn't enough, but it could potentially help with immune modulation if we could ever get access to it. But I think a long time ago, the pharmaceutical companies thought, okay, well, we can give people histamine and they can get better, or else we can give them antihistamines for their allergies forever, right? And which would be more lucrative. So, but if you were getting histamine injections, you would still want to support the body in treating the parasites because the body is fighting. And if you research a little bit, some of you may not be interested in science, I love science, but the innate immune response is really the first defense against parasites. And there is this new, what is it called? What do they call it? Mast cell activation disorder. So it drives me nuts because it's not a disorder. Your mast cells are part of your immune system and they're fighting an infection. And because we don't identify the infection, we just go, oh, the mast cells, they're doing inappropriate behaviors and they're misbehaving. And so we'll call it a disorder. Instead of going, why are they fighting? They're there to protect us from infections, from parasites. What are they fighting? Like, let's do some research and figure out what they're fighting. And no, let's call it mast cell activation disorder. And then we can just manage the symptoms of mast cell activation disorder forever. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background on that. It is a fascinating topic. Hello, Wendy. I'm just kind of cruising through these questions. You have MS, but you've only had one lesion. And you've been on the MS drug for over 16 years. You've been on a MS drug for over 16 years. Do I really have MS? So in the world that I live in the scientific world, the current scientific world, the world where people are recovering, it is that the symptoms of multiple sclerosis are caused not by some mysterious unknown disease, but they are caused by infections. And if you have been on multiple sclerosis drugs for 16 years, I'm guessing that you're maybe on Copaxone or Rebif or one of the older drugs. And I'm really happy that you have not really had a lot of disability. Actually, you haven't told me. You said you have one lesion. So if you want after, you can look up, it's called, what is it called? Radiological paradox. So MRIs, basically with MRIs, that some people that have a lot of lesions do not have a lot of MS symptoms, and people that have very few lesions could have a lot of MS symptoms. So it's a radiological paradox. If you do radiological paradox in MRIs, you'll see that. So with, by now, wouldn't they know what causes MS? And still they're like, well, we'll try to use an MRI and and there's a lot of misdiagnoses with MS. Like, it can take months, if not years, to get a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis with using MRI. So it's not an exact science. Sometimes they'll have to do a lumbar puncture. And again, they're looking at, with the lumbar puncture, they're looking at immune properties again. So the immune system, immune function. And again, the lumbar puncture is not an exact science either. So it's kind of like they look at your symptoms, they do a clinical analysis, looking at your reflexes and just what your ability to do and what you can't do. They look at MRI, sometimes they'll have to do lumbar puncture, and through all of that, they decide whether you have MS or not. And so it's not an exact science, and because they don't know what causes MS. But what you have is you have infections. I believe the pockets of infection are the lesions in your central nervous system, and they can heal over. So whatever, I don't know if you're really sick or not sick, but the one lesion really is irrelevant, because some people can have a lot of lesions and they may not have a lot of MS symptoms. There are people that are over 50 that have lesions in their central nervous system. There are people that have Crohn's disease, autism. So lesion, and we know that parasites, the scientific literature shows that parasites produce lesions in our central nervous system. So that is hardcore science, and you can look that up, and I've shared studies on that. So we know that parasites cause lesions in the central nervous system. So if your MS has not progressed a lot, then it has more to do with your environment. It has to do with your certain things. I don't know anything about you, but maybe you've been fairly health conscious, and maybe you have been really trying to watch what you eat and exercise, and maybe you don't have too much stress in your life. I'm just guessing, but that's usually the case. Or if you just have one lesion, but you're dealing with a lot of MS symptoms, right? The MS drugs, all they do, every single one of them, is they suppress parts of your immune system. So the newer ones will prevent your B cells and your T cells, or greatly reduce them from going into your central nervous system. They will prevent your soldiers from going into your central nervous system. And we know that infection lives in your central nervous system. So you need your immune system there. And that's not the answer. Your immune system is not the problem. It's the infection. So research the drug that you're on. A lot of people that I'm not even working with, they feel better off of the MS drug. And they have not progressed any worse or better off of them. If you are on the disease-modifying drugs for many years, we have observed that because we're suppressing our immune system, that we could be more susceptible to other parasites coming in, moving in, causing different symptoms, giving us a different disease label. Some like to live in our joints, some like to live in our reproductive organs, some like to live in our liver, some like to live in our breasts, etc., in our brain, in our sinuses, in our ears. So it really depends which microbes and where they like to live. So I would really encourage you, and also Wendy, that sometimes people have 5 or 10 good years and then they get a hit, they get a flare. And if you don't treat these infections, they continue to multiply in our body. And if you have done well, then you have slowed them down, but they still populate. And so it's really important, just as we deworm our dogs, our cats, our horses, all of our different animals, we should be deworming ourselves. And yes, there are parasites in all the developed countries, absolutely. Okay, we have gone for 50 minutes. I am going to let you guys go. Just type your questions in. We will answer your comments, your questions. We love your comments. Let us know what you think. Do you think that MS is a genetic disease? It is inherited? Do you not believe it's inherited? Have you had experience with family members? Just share all of that. Please share this video with others that are searching for answers, other groups. Help us get the word out. So like and share and subscribe if you want to be notified when I share the next training video. And if you're at that place where you're like, Pam, I'm so ready to be a wellness champion, I'm so ready to treat these parasites, then what you can do is watch my masterclass training. And that is how myself and others have recovered from multiple sclerosis. I will share with you the steps we took. You'll hear a bunch of case studies. You'll actually see the evidence of the different types of parasites that are involved, that are making you have these horrible symptoms. So it really is eye-opening. It's inspiring. It'll give you hope. It'll show you what you need to do, the steps. And then if you want support, you can reach out to me, reach out to us, and you can become a wellness champion right away, and you can start on your journey back to health. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care and bye-bye for now.